A man getting bit by an alligator and he screams. Okay, quiet. Hey, quiet. Sit out, Sergeant Lee.
Ow! No, not an owl. A real scream of pain.
Joel, Rolo, thanks so much for joining us, and congrats on the film. How's the festival going so far?
Oh, it's going great. A lot of positive feedback. It's just been really cool to see our film on the big screen. So yeah, it's been cool.
Yeah, it's been really, really exciting. Because depending on if distribution ever happens or whatnot, like just to be able to see it on a big screen's really like it's hard to put into words because we've been watching it on iPads, iPhones, on a monitor, so to finally see it was just like, oh man, that was its own kind of feeling.
Nice. So I wanted to start with language, and this may seem a little pedantic, but I want to do it anyway, right? And I know that the film touches on it as well, but I think language can get co-opted and appropriated so often. So I'm curious how you guys would define punk. And not just in terms of music, but also culturally, socially, artistically.
It was one of the things that was touched on the doc, but for me it was really inclusivity, just like this accepting culture. I grew up a big Fat Records fan. If I automatically saw someone with like a NoFX shirt or Lagwagon or Propaganda, you were already instantly cool in my book and we're friends. I would go up to you, I say, hey dude, nice shirt, and then the conversation starts and, oh, we were at the same show. Oh, and we were also at that same. So you build this like new camaraderie that you didn't even know, and like that to me was punk rock. Like, it was just acceptance.
Yeah, honestly, just to kind of mirror that a little bit, for me, I was able to understand that method because I played sports, I did other things that the average punk kid did not do, but I was still accepted because I enjoyed the idea of their music, I enjoyed the community. I've shared this a few times, but when I was in high school, I worked at an ice skating rink, and Joel was playing in a band. And so we used to book shows at the ice skating rink, and it started out with 20 kids and got up to about 100, 200 kids. Like, it was wild. And they ended up getting signed and like toured in this whole thing. And
those shows wound up getting shut down because of like...
So mosh, a pit on an ice skating rink, that's a whole other level, right? That's pretty sweet.
That sounds awesome. I mean, I loved it. I loved it. Again, some of the other things that the doc touched upon was the DIY aesthetic as well, right? Yes, the inclusivity, but the DIY, and also this like sense of love throughout. I mean, you just talked about mosh pits and how you help someone up, right? If something happens, you help that person up so that there isn't further injury.
Yeah, that was just because I kind of remember it. I don't remember what trip it was, but I remember we were sitting at this taco shop in California trying to figure out what the name of the doc was going to be, because we're like 2 years in, we're 30-something interviews, and like people keep asking, so what's the name of it? We're like, it's a punk rock doc. Like we're trying to, yeah, like we're trying to think. And I forgot what interview we were coming off of, but it was like, man, DIY had just become this kind of sudden theme. And then Rolo and I started talking. I was like, oh, wait, we've been DIY. Like, the whole movie is a two-man production. You know what I mean? I'm running cameras. He's running sound. Story was by us. All the trips and travel he's planning, and I'm planning logistics of, like, how we're going to get certain shots. Like, it was just this, like, two-man team that literally took it from start to end. So this film truly is DIY, And it just made sense. Like, oh, that's the movie. It's DIY,
So is an aspect... I want to go back to this idea of like punk as well, and again, I think punk outside of music as well, right? But so is an aspect of that, you think, kind of doing things outside of a system, or maybe like not adhering to the system structure?
I would definitely say that because Brett Gurwitz of Epitaph Records, he really touches big on that point about, I guess, it was supposed to be counterculture, and now it's become, mainstream culture, which is fine. I guess that just means it's finally accepted. Because like I remember when I was younger looking up at the tattooed guys with, plugs and this, and I was like, man, I want to be that cool one day. And now I have the tattoos and the plugs, and I'm like, well, when do I get to be cool?
Yeah, same.
We're all just trying to be
Right.
Right.
We're all acting like being cool doesn't matter, but really we just want to be cool. Right?
But for my daughters, it's like they're not, tattoos, gauges, whatever. It doesn't matter. She'll like point out face tattoos and be like, Daddy, that's pretty like cool. It's not jarring to you. So like I said, it goes back to me to that acceptance. But I guess, being outside of the norm, but just still being accepted.
Or creating your own norm, maybe.
Yeah, that's good. Creating your own norm. Yeah.
You guys touched on it a little bit in the film, especially for your interviewees, about the evolution and how it starts where it starts in different areas of the world, and then at a certain point, like everything does in a capitalistic society that we live in, that comes commercialized, right? As you went through all these conversations, what do you take away from where does the next resurgence of pop or punk come from in this case?
Yeah, I think, was it John Ross Bowie maybe, or Fred Armisen? Yeah, that wasn't in the film, but Fred Armisen did touch on, like, I think the next biggest thing is just somebody coming out of, like, Ohio, and you know what I mean? And with the age of internet and social media, I think that's super possible. And I think, in my opinion, I think that's where the artistry is going. We want to see that person that's coming out of nowhere. I mean, I think American Idol and the shows like that were the first of bringing the little guy up, and then there have Kelly Clarkson, #1 TV show, and she was founded on American Idol. So I think that's going to happen with punk as well. I think there's going to be that one band or person that just rises up from the middle of nowhere.
So let me ask you this, then where do you guys find, or are you guys on the lookout for what you feel is the next level of the punk star? And not even punk star part, but just...
No, I think now being in my 40s, I'm just stuck into that 90s, like,
Sure.
SoCal punk scene. Like, I do appreciate new bands, and there are new bands that I guess I hear from time to time. I'm like, okay, cool, they made it in their rotation. But I feel like I still kind of listen to the same band that I've been listening to, waiting for their new albums.
Right.
But yeah, I think, I don't know.
So like a SoCal band like Joyce Manor has no appeal, or... I'm just curious, right? Or...
Yeah. Well, like I said, I go just back to Fat Records. For me, it was all about Fat Records and Drive-Thru Records. I was just on the cusp of that time where Warped Tour was like starting to like break, and I went to the first. I remember it was not the first Warped Tour, but the first officially branded Vans Warped Tour in Dallas. So for me, it was always that skate punk culture, this and that. So I guess I adhere to that being punk. So anything that doesn't necessarily fall into like double time or just like loud and aggressive, it's usually I'm not listening to it.
Okay. No, that's
not a bad way.
No, but I think that's really interesting because and part of what I think the doc touches on is all these different sort of variations of punk, right? And you got like melodic hardcore, and I think you mentioned like Wilhelm Scream, right, which kind of fits into that melodic hardcore. But then you have like the more humorous bands, and I'm thinking of like current bands like Wet Leg and like who I think kind of fits into this mold of like being kind of a funny punk band because they just seem to take the piss out of everyone like all the time. They're like no, this was a joke, but like y'all dug it so much, and now we're like on these big tours, and they're just like, yeah, cool, right?
I can totally agree with that. That's a good outlook on it because, that's a new way of looking at it. I've never really thought about it that way. I get into my own, I guess, counterculture, and I associate that with being punk. And I like even watching the doc after we finished with it, like, yeah, there's so many different takes on what it could be because someone was in it for the laughter, and I have good friends that are in it for the political side and the angsty, and I'm like, I'm in it for the fun. Like, it's supposed to be fast. I play drums. I'm a drummer. I come from, so it's like, no, it really is just about the music. I listen to like vocals phonetically. I don't even know some of the lyrics of some of my favorite songs because I'm just listening to it as a whole.
But it's an interesting progression of how like you did get that, anger in the late 70s, early 80s, coming out of the Thatcher and Reagan era, or being steeped in it, right? And then going into kind of evolving into that humorous where you got Dead Kennedys and Dead Milkmen and those groups, and then kind of getting into that really kind of like tapping into that teenage angst and talking about girls and getting drunk and but all in a positive way that kind of came out like with that Warped Tour and like the American Pie era and stuff like that. It's a really, really interesting kind of evolution for that. Is there anywhere you see this going like next, or like where is punk not touched on so far?
Man, that's a really good question, because I was going to say, I think a band like Mannequin Pussy, I saw them in Fort Worth not too long ago.
Or the Sniffers.
Yeah. And so there still are those bands that are like fighting the fight or have that type of energy, and in some way they're still underground. And so that resurgence is kind of coming back up, I think, and I think there's going to be that new type of Blink-182. Maybe it's that Turnstile band, like seeing them live at opening up for Blink-182 was like, whoa! I just went back in time for a second, but realized that it's new, it sounds different, and it's really, really cool. In terms of like, what could be talked about now? I mean, I don't know. That's a great question.
I think it'll just all go back to personal experience. You know what I mean? Like every artist that comes out is going to sing about what they know, and I think that's what we attach ourselves to. You know what I mean? Because like I said, yeah, Kenny Hoopla's doing great stuff. You know what I mean? Young guy. But then I still really anticipate like a Wilhelm Scream's new album, because that's my favorite band. And what I love about that is like Nuno, the singer, like if you really listen and deep dive into their lyrics, it really just all about is New Bedford, Massachusetts, not Boston. They're from New Bedford. Don't get it twisted. And it all goes back, and the things that they've done for their city locally too, with like their friend Craig opening up a burrito shop and like all these things that they're doing, like they're creating this like really cool New Bedford punk rock culture, and they're literally just spreading New Bedford punk, which is like cool. Well, where's the Dallas band spreading Dallas punk? And I don't think California. So like, yeah, hopefully kind of, to piggyback off of Rolo saying like, yeah, like each person just keeps bringing their own individual thing,
And I mean, that's the other great thing is the kind of regionality of punk. I mean, music in general, but I think, like you just touched on, right? It's New Bedford punk, right? Or it's Dallas punk, or it's
DC hardcore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and you saw that. I mean, again, with bands like Fugazi, etc. Right. And so maybe, yeah. I mean, you mentioned the kind of digital era, and maybe, yeah, that's what we see more and more of, is that punk expression of self-experience through those channels, and then that's what we can latch onto and see, and how we find it, I guess.
Yeah,
and punk bands on TikTok.
And you have to figure the barrier to entry is lower, right? I mean, aside from being able to gain some sort of popularity, as long as you're willing to make the music and make the message, it seems like it's more accessible now than it ever has been, right?
Oh yeah, I love that. I was a Guitar Center employee for a little while, and I remember the digital boom of like, every home studio and blah blah, and that was great. And I love that because I think it's great to level the playing field, because then true art will stand out when everybody has access to the same equipment. If we were still doing film and this was that, I don't know if I'd be doing this. Digital gave an easy access for me to become a filmmaker, and I always have those debates with people. If you play in a band, or if you want to be in a band, you get a group of guys, you get together, you write songs, you start playing shows, you put out a CD, you're a band. It doesn't matter if you're on a label. I think the same for a filmmaker. If you have a camera on your iPhone, you get friends, you light it, you really put your heart and your heart and sweat into that content, and you release it on YouTube, you're a filmmaker. You know what I mean? The laurels from DIFF is just like awesome. I can finally pat myself on the back, like, okay, we kind of did it. For a little bit, we could be like, yeah, but. Yeah, I think it's a great time to be a creator, musician or filmmaker.
Do you think that is maybe like a central punk ethos too, right? Of that, like, look, it's about the process of doing. It's not about the sort of recognition from any one place or person.
Yeah, Will Wheaton touches a little bit on that. That's part of punk, is like the process, and I think some people mention like the art of it is gone in terms of like making flyers and hanging them out. Now you just post, and then you do it again, and then you change a few things, and then you do it again. We used to go out and put flyers and I mean, we did that for our credits, you know what I mean? Like,
That was the most DIY we could think, because with no budget, how do you do an opening sequence?
I'm actually like a little more surprised that stuff like posting flyers or stuff like variations of street art didn't stick around longer after COVID or during COVID. I mean, I guess I'll admit this on mic, but like during COVID, I lived in a different neighborhood than I do now, but I went out and would wheat paste around the neighborhood, right? What I thought was like, provocative things, talking about gentrification, even though you could call me an early adopter in that neighborhood, right? But I was still pissed about it. But you didn't see like a lot of that, or any like more kind of like graffiti art and stuff like, and it just didn't stick around. But because like now we're back to this like, well, the version of posting flyers now is like a new Instagram post, right? Or a new TikTok post to get the word out. And I guess I'm just like, it's a shame, or it surprises me that analog didn't kind of come back and stick around.
That is funny, because, with the resurgence of like cassettes and LPs, like a lot of punk bands do that. Yeah, like it is talked about in the doc. Like I do miss that art form of like the flyer. Flyers used to be so cool, and I played in bands since I was 13, and I have a collection of flyers. And it's funny because those are the only like true like actual things that say like this really happened, because it was pre-MySpace.
Yeah.
So it's like,
right.
So it's like, no, look, yeah.
right, yes.
Nobody,
yeah.
you had flyers and you had zines, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, zines were another thing that were like staples of that scene, or even like any kind of indie music scene, right? And I just mean non-establishment, right? Again, another word that's been, I think, co-opted to mean something else.
Because I remember before, like, being local here to Dallas, before Deep Ellum would, let all these just really shitty kids bands play, we'd have to go and put our own, at a VA, or, like a Knights of Columbus, or whatever we could find. Like, okay, cool, let's set up the PA, and, I love that Fred Armisen story in the doc, because, like, it's like, oh, man, that would, like I said, making it was like, dude, we really are doing this DIY. I was like, we did that. That's crazy. Yeah. And we're still doing that sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, I had friends in high school who, would put on basement shows, right? And put on basement shows and just play like 3 Ramones songs over and over and over again. But it was awesome, right? And it was just like, they just tell everybody at school, and they're like, if you bring this little postcard that we made, you get $1 off the $2 entry fee. So, yeah.
I had in high school, we our house parties would delve into that, because there was a few bands at my high school, Earl Turner, you know what I mean? There was like, Nick Forte's band and Marcus Antoine's band, and so when we'd have house parties, we would all just like play our songs, switch off, and then we would get together and try to do the audible, like, oh, play this by Korn, or play that Blink song, and it was like, all right, who kind of knows it? We just switch off, yeah.
So I want to cut back to the film just a little bit. Like, how did this idea gestate, and how did you start getting all these great voices together to start talking about this concept?
You want to fill that? Okay. It's a long one. I'll start it, and then Rolo can finish, and we'll jump back and forth like Pulp Fiction. Right. The best way is to start with the end. So there's Spam Records is an Austrian record label that also does Spam Fest, and it's one of the largest, Eastern European festivals for punk rock. And he gets, like in the bands you could think of. Rancid's played it, Bowling for Soup. Who else? The Destroy Boys, you know what I mean? So I play in a band, and our band was lucky enough to tour Europe and actually play the festival. And I had come off of another punk project that he was familiar with. So when he had found out that, like, oh, you guys are filmmakers, like, I want to work on this punk doc. And it initially started out as a Spam doc, where it was supposed to be about, like, just the company and this and that. But as we started delving into the interviews and stuff and trying to figure it out, it was still too new for them. So everyone was like, oh, well, I kind of know Spam. I kind of know Stefan. So it was like, is this just kind of turning into like a corporate doc in a sense? Like, what is this supposed to be? So after Rolo and I sat down and we talked about it for a little bit, we realized like some of the interview questions that we'd already started were like forming this narrative of just punk rock in general. So we reapproached a story about a year in, and in the last 2.5 years, The last year and a half, yeah. So the first year, but the last year and a half, we just kind of took it another direction and kind of opened it up with more of the questions, and we just kind of found out that we were, I guess, making the history of pop punk in a sense.
Yeah, like we noticed there really hadn't been. I mean, everyone's seen who started punk. You know, you got Ramones, Clash, whatever, and it's like we haven't seen anything that just really talked about the culture, and so much has happened since that time. So. Yeah, we kind of pitched it to Stefan, and Stefan really was behind getting all the interviews. And in terms of things like Fred Armisen, you know, we got John Ross Bowie, and John was like, "Hey, have you talked to Fred?" And we're like, "Fred who?"
Really? Who?
Like, Fred Armisen.
Like Fred?
Like, is that your driver? We're like, Fred Armisen wants to talk to us. So I mean, and we had just came back from Dallas from interviewing John, and I think it was like within 30 days. We had to figure out how to go back, and I think, and Stefan and his wife Biggie flew back for that trip. So it was kind of like really quick when it came to the interview stuff because we were on their schedules, and Joel and I drove so much. I mean, we went from like Calabasas to like the LA area, and then down to San Diego, and then to Vegas, and to Big Bear. We went to the Guttermouth show in Big Bear, and it was snowing, so. We had to put chains on, and
we were literally like side to side on I was like, dude, we gotta stop.
And we just sat in traffic for hours and hours going up the mountain, you know, and finally get to the Guttermouth show, and it was one of the coolest shows
that was
ever.
One of the best shows I'd ever been to, like hanging from the rafters, like literally, like whoa.
Yeah. So that's pretty much how it happened, and then we just kind of took it off from there. And I think we interviewed around 30 people, so having to cut down, and post was.
I think it was 46.
Oh, see, there you go. Yeah.
Well, because I remember that was the one thing that Rolo was like, we got to stop doing interviews because we were starting to like, we're like literally in the middle of editing. It's like, but no, we got to get this one because it's just, we never know. I would keep doing it down to the deadline if it was me, just to get everybody in.
So who didn't make the cut? Can you tell?
If it's you don't want to say.
I was going to say if it's sensitive.
Not sensitive.
I'm like curious because.
Well, I'll say Mike from Chaser was a little disappointed. But, after we talked to him, though, it was just understanding of how it was a narrative. We had, so the movie is 52 minutes long. The original cut was 2 hours. Our what we consider our first actual cut that just wasn't talking head with B-roll was like an hour 20. And the cut that we submitted was 52 minutes because we had to cut our Warped Tour section because we had talked to Kevin Lyman. We had talked to all these bands, and it was great, but everything was done in like a retrospective feel. Oh, I wish we had Warped Tour back. Destroy Boys, oh, I wish we could have played it. We had all these people talking about it in the past tense, and 2025, when the movie's coming out, Warped Tour is back. And we were going to have time to go back and talk to Kevin Lyman, and I didn't want to do like a Zoom meeting thing, or anything, because I was like, we just, so that got nixed. And so when we started cutting it, it was just like, well, this is the story, time be damned.
No, I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say some of the artists like Kenny Hoopla, Venomous Pinks, Mudfight. So there was quite a few people.
Oh man, Bill Stevenson from The Descendants, Steve Caballero,
So nobody.
Yeah,
I got you. Yeah.
So
didn't miss anything.
It was hard. It was so hard.
Well, I can't imagine, right? I mean, having that many and then realizing but this is the story. Like where we thought we were going is not where we're going, and that's part of the process, isn't it?
Yeah, it really was.
But I think you made the right choice with not adding in that Zoom, not going that, because I think what the documentary has going for it is that immediacy and that conversation. You really feel like you're in the room with these people, and it really does. I mean, it flows just so well. This is a super fast 52 minutes, and it's so because I hear you talk about a 2-hour cut, and I'm like, well, I could have watched this for 2 hours. I could have listened to the story for however long these people wanted to talk.
There's so many, Rolo's right. There's so many great stories. One of my favorites that didn't make it was Erin Burkett. She used to run Fat Records, but now she's just a punk icon. But she has this great story of she discovered punk when she was younger, and she got her first Dead Kennedys CD or album, LP or record, and her dad was like a big Kennedy fan, so when he found it in the room, was like, "What is this blasphemy?" and like broke it over his like, like it was just like, that's such a cool story of like, that's that's like a movie, like, oh, I hate punk rock, Footloose, like no dancing. But like there's a lot of cool stories, that just, oh man, I wish we could have put it all in.
Yeah, like Fat Mike from NoFX, that alone was so wild. And
we had because NoFX retired last year in 2024. We had a really heart-to-heart, like we started out with a Fat Mike interview, and after an hour in, we were talking to Mike, and we got into some good stuff, and it's just like, but it doesn't fit the doc, like
supplemental materials for the Blu-ray. That's what that is.
Yeah, we've been talking about like, what do we turn into supplemental stuff? What do we turn into featurettes now?
This does feel like it should be on VHS though. I feel like you do need a VHS cut of this.
You're right. And then those outtakes are just like after the credits.
Yeah. If there was only a Laserdisc burner out there somewhere, right?
Oh, that would be so great. Laserdisc.
Did you ever run into any sort of like, because you guys are where I'm coming during the Warped Tour, did you ever feel like there was any sort of resentment because like of the popularization of punk as it got to that stage from the kind of the old hands that maybe had to fight it a little bit harder, or was it more, we're just happy that this music is continuing?
It was definitely half and half, because there are certain artists, like, and a lot of them express their opinions in it. Like Joey Cape's happy for new music, just like Brett Gurewitz, because obviously if you're running a record label, you have to stay on current trends. You know what I mean? But then you get bands like Unwritten Laws, one of my favorite bands for a really long time, and they're not necessarily happy with the state of punk rock because they don't think it needs to be commercialized and this and that. And they're still playing the Sunset Strip, and they're still touring, and they're still doing great. Like their shows are still awesome. But yeah, when it's that art versus commerce conversation, you know what I mean? Like once you inject too much money into something, when does it stop being art? And is it ever really art? Because if you put it out there and judge it, then it's art. But I guess if I make $1 million on it, then you can talk shit all about my art all you want.
Right, yeah, exactly, right. And Wheaton has the point about how it's become elevator music, and it's it's soundtrack music. I mean, like for shows that weren't punk rock at all, like Seinfeld and things like that, right? It's just when we're playing, and Time of Our Lives is kind of lends itself to that type of sentimentality, right? And there's back in the '80s when hair bands would do the same thing about doing those kind of ballads to put themselves out there. But it's an interesting kind of again, as any sort of art form progresses, even street art, when it becomes a commodity. Does it lose a lot of its immediacy and meaning for people?
They sold like Banksy art. Like, how do you sell Banksy art? You know what I mean? Like, how do you sell Banksy art? And then he shreds it, and it's like, oh, now it's worth even more. Like, what are you people doing?
Which just seems like antithetical to the whole like stunt that he's pulling there, right? And I think that goes back to that same question about like when does what is punk and what remains punk, and then like what happens when you're no longer punk, or when do you cross the line? I use the Shepard Fairey thing a lot, right? Started off street artist doing like kind of controversial stuff, getting in trouble with the cops, and now he's wearing Hublot watches, right, and doing ads for that. I'm just kind of like, I guess get yours, right? Sure, but again, like that just seems like off message from how.
Yeah.
Shepard Fairey's never come on the podcast.
Well, I'll use Mod Sun as a good example of that, because like I can see how a lot of people may not consider him punk rock and this and that, but when you actually talk to him and you know that he comes from the Warped Tour background and being a drummer in different punk bands, and then deciding like, hey, I'm gonna go try to do this, and still kind of keeping that like punk edge, and even saying in the doc, it's okay that it's a style and it's a fashion and something that you can market. Like, I respect that, and I'm not necessarily a big fan of the music as like my wife is, but when it's on, I don't mind it, and I'm not going to change it. And there's a couple of tracks I'm like, dude, it's good. Like I can hear the artistry, and I can hear the tinges of punk in it enough for me to sit back and enjoy it, rather than be like, oh, I'm just going to bash this because I'm this like, oh, this punk rock of this young guy or something. And
I think if it stays true to the ethos, right? Because we were talking about why you guys got into punk in the first place, is that inclusivity and like this community that's built around it. I think we can ultimately embrace whatever comes out, regardless of how popular it is or not, right? As long as it still remains true to what we believe punk to be at its core, right?
I like that, because that's true.
And for me, like my punk era was the 2000s, early 2000s, so not realizing that it was underground, blah, 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 and then growing with the genre, it just made sense that it was getting that big. I mean, like I mentioned, we were throwing shows at my the ice skating rink that I worked at. So for me, the bigger that it got was like, yeah, I'm kind of in this wave too. I'm trying to grow it also, and to see it progress, and not even realizing that punk was on Seinfeld, or like they're playing on David Letterman, or they're playing on the Tonight Show or whatever. Like, it just was so natural to me to see those bands kind of become that.
And I think as we all age, right, we have that level of like, oh, you're a poser if you do certain things. Like, so I remember like struggling to see a Dead Kennedys video on like Punk Rock Girl on MTV, right? And then so when Green Day comes out, and I'm a little bit older, or a lot older, I guess, in this case, right? And Duke comes out, I'm like, I like this music, and I'm like, shit, should I like this music? Because like it seems a little, and ultimately at the end of the day, right? If it's good, it's good. If it's, and we can go from there.
And I'm digging on Chapel Roan right now because my daughters and my wife, dude, there's some songs where I'm like, that's a punk beat. Like, it is hidden behind pop synth chords, but it's like...
Well, and her taking the piss out of that country song that she has, that's where she's taking the piss out of pop country, too. I think she's brilliant.
I love her message. I think she's on point. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily, like, a fan of the Billie Eilish music, whatever, but, like, the message that they send of, like, it doesn't have to be sex sells. It can be artistry. It can be outrageousness, and I can have an actual voice and an opinion. So, my daughters, yeah, Chapel Roan all you want, girls. Go for it.
Well, the good news is we're never going to get rid of oppression or political bullshittery. So, like, there's always going to be youth that are going to come out of this.
There's
right?
always going to be checks and balances, right?
And I think there's areas for punk to expand. Like, and I think you guys touched on it with especially near the end when you're interviewing female punk artists. And I think there's an area for there were people of color in punk as well early on, and I think that's remained throughout. But I think there's areas there where this could truly take root as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna shout out Fat by the Gallon. Joel plays drums in that band, and that's a rockabilly punk band. Kind of go into that where the pockets of music are coming out of, or kind of saying Gulf Coast punk, But
I've been trying to rep that for a while, and it hasn't caught on. We got East Coast punk, West Coast punk, but Gulf Coast punk needs love, man. There are bands in Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Florida that are rippers, dude.
You just expressed the sort of like crossover or even like inner kind of connectivity between like genres of music, right? Rockabilly, punk. I mean, rockabilly's like what, this far away from punk, really? Right? And I mean, in a lot of rap, especially like early hip hop, right, is just like right there. I mean, same sentiment. Right?
Well, you got bands like Fishbone too and things like that.
Sure.
And the Beasties came out of punk to start off with as well.
I consider the Beastie Boys a punk band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's a punk band.
Well, cool. I think we could sit here and talk all day about this stuff. I mean, just congratulations. One, thanks for coming out and talking us with it as well. And it's always good to see Dallas boys and DFW boys do good. So, so congratulations on the show, and congratulations on completing the doc. And we can't wait to hear what you guys do with it next, and what the next follow-up is for you guys. I guess let me ask you that question. What do you, aside from now that you've hit DIFF and you've seen it on the big screen, what's next for the documentary, and what's next for each of you guys?
We've been talking like a narrative short, because I think, I don't know if I can speak for every filmmaker, but we're definitely like have been eyeballing narratives for years. We do a bunch of commercial, corporate stuff, you know what I mean, and pays bills. So this doc was definitely a labor of love. So if we're going to do it again, we definitely want to tell a movie, like make a movie, tell a story.
Yeah, and we truly are DIYers, and we tried to do a short a few years ago, and it took place out in a trail, and it started raining, and our cars were starting to sink, and so we shot for like maybe 30 minutes and spent the rest of the day trying to figure out how to get our cars out. So
the tow truck came and got stuck, and we had to call a tow truck to get the tow truck. It was like the worst shoot. I was like, this is terrible.
We hope this would be a great platform and a good jumping off point. Hopefully get some funding. So if you know any guys,
we'll keep our ear out for sure. Right?
I mean, please let us know what comes up next, right?
For sure.
We would love to support in every way that we can. Yeah. Joel, Rolo, thank you both for coming
this
out
is
and talking
awesome,
to us.
dude.
And best of luck with the film, right? Love it. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Thank you. Cool.
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you like today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time,